Posadism. So before I get into what Posadism is, I need to explain Trotskyism, which Posadism is a sort of subset of. So let us wind back to 1924, and the revolution is complete, comrades. We did it. Oops, Lenin just died. So now we have both Stalin and Trotsky, who both had very different views on how to run the Soviet Union. Well, some infighting happens and Stalin comes out on top. Meanwhile, Trotsky limps over onto Mexico, where he has an affair with artist Frida Kahlo, and then gets an ice pick in the head. But rewinding a bit. The initial split between Stalin and Trotsky created a divide amongst communist movements in the world. In fact, one that even continues to this day on irrelevant Twitter threads. So most communist movements ended up going with Moscow and expelled any Trotsky supporters, who then ended up founding their own communist parties. Trotskyism took a communist but anti-Stalinist line, and advocated political opposition to Stalinism, which they saw as leading to an entrenched bureaucracy and to development of a new ruling class under the guise of Communist Party leadership. They even founded a Fourth International to rival the Third International, but then it shattered into a bunch of ideologically 95% the same splinter groups that still hated each other because leftist infighting. But then there's a lot of merging back together and then shattering again, confused, yeah, so am I. Okay, that's cool and all, but what does this have to do with bathing the world in nuclear hellfire? Well, the Posadists are one of those splinter groups that branched off from mainstream Trotskyism. So once again, we must rewind the clock a bit to 1912 Argentina, where J. Posadist was born to Italian immigrant parents. Posadist tried to start a career as a footballer, but when that failed, he went to his only available alternative, left-wing politics. He gained a small following going around South America establishing Trotskyist parties, and eventually the Latin American bureau of the Fourth International. So remember leftist infighting? Well, yeah, in 1953, following the breakup of the Fourth International, Posadist and the Latin American Bureau sided with Michael Pablo and the International Secretariat. However, during this time, Posadist and his followers began quarreling with the rest of the Secretariat over disagreements on issues like nuclear war, and in 1962, completely separated to found the Posadist International. This new organization had branches all over the world, but were mostly concentrated in South America, and started to gain notoriety for their, interesting beliefs. They took part in guerrilla movements in Brazil, Guatemala, and pre-Castro era Cuba. In Guatemala, they fell out of favor with other guerrillas for, in true Trotskyist style, diverting funds intended for the armed struggle to produce a newspaper in Europe. Now, to illustrate how batshit these guys are, they got banned from Cuba after the revolution for saying Fidel Castro did not go far enough. They developed a cult of personality around Posadists, which was considered extreme even by Trotskyist standards. Any discussion within Posadist circles on a given topic was immediately ended when J. Posadist decided on a particular interpretation. According to one former Italian comrade, their meetings would consist of listening to the latest tapes sent by Posadists. Discussions would never go beyond finding ways to understand better and explain clearly what was said in a given text by their leader. He was even referred to as Dear Master by a resolution by the Posadist International a year after his death. But now, what you probably clicked on this video for. Yeah, they were really enthusiastic about nuclear holocaust. They believed that nuclear war was not only likely, but also desirable. For in their view, nuclear war was the supreme opportunity for the forces of the world revolution. A devastating nuclear winter would represent the final settlements of accounts of socialism against the capitalist system. Basically, the logic was that civilization would be destroyed, but everyone would come out of the rubble and embrace, quotation marks, true communism for some reason. I don't think they ever got the memo on how nuclear winters make building a new perfect society pretty difficult. Now, even though they didn't believe that China or the Soviets represented true communism, the Posadists were known to write to their leaders asking them to blanket the planet in nuclear hellfire. They were also really into UFOs. Basically, their view was that UFOs are proof of advanced alien civilization. And since advances in society come about from advances in technology, these extraterrestrials must come from a socialist society. And they also do not come to Earth because we are just primitive capitalists and deformed bureaucratic socialists. Now, the former Italian Posadist from earlier said that ufology was never of great importance to them, as they had more important concerns, like nuclear war. Also, they believe that humans could communicate to dolphins, and that humans will ultimately reproduce asexually, like amoeba. Now, after Posadist died, the group pretty much withered away, with the only active Posadist party now being in Uruguay, which got a whopping 0.1% of the vote in the Uruguayan elections of 2004. Thanks for patrons Andy Luke, Emerson Salmerio Rubio, Link the Bets 24, Sean Finerty Loins, Skylar Weston, and Zyma.